when we tell the story, I think a really important piece of the story is that Darren and I were trying to have kids for 3 years and couldn't. Um, and then finally we, went through IVF. That was a very difficult decision for us, deciding whether or not that's the route that we wanted to go through. A lot of emotional roller coasters through that process. And we made that decision. It was great, and it was, kind of a lot easier than I thought anyone thought it could be. And then Christopher was born. And the first thing that we noticed, I always say this when I speak places, but we noticed that he had his grandfather's ears, his uncle's nose, and this huge lump on his back. And so that, we kind of spiraled into asking questions all the time. Christopher had shown some other health issues that just weren't normal, but weren't severe. We always go into these doctor's appointments and we're like, something's wrong, like something's not right. And everyone's like, no, it's just, his hands are here, his back is here, his hips don't look right. But there was never a whole kind of package approach. Until we walked into Tufts, and Dr. Jody Hoffman was there, and yeah, she's amazing. And I remember the look on her face, and I was like, this isn't good. And I always say, like, it was the second we walked in, we both, I think, knew immediately they knew what was wrong, but they have to get the test to confirm it. I think our appointment was like at 4:00 or something in the afternoon. We didn't leave there till 6:30 or 7. And we, at first we were like, oh, the doctors are so nice. They're all staying late. Like, they're just going to run some tests. They don't want us to have to come back. That's so sweet. And I remember Darren and I being like, this probably isn't them being sweet. This must be an emergency. And that was the first day that we had heard lysosomal storage disease. And then I was like, Darren, don't go home and Google this. Like, this is not going to be good. I was actually sitting right here when we got home, because I think we both still were like, but he's basically fine. Like, he had this really great personality.
Yeah, like, you thought that, hey, what else could be
all this genetic testing that you have to do beforehand. I was actually really irritated on the way to the geneticist. Like, this is going to be a huge waste of time. He's IVF. They know basically every strand of his DNA at this point. And that obviously was not true, because they don't test for obviously everything. That'd be incredibly expensive. So, we came home and I was like, yeah, but he's fine. Like, they think it's a lysosomal. I still couldn't get it in my head. And I, after pleading with Darren not to Google it, sat myself right here in this corner of the couch and started Googling lump on your back, cloudy eyes. That was the other thing. Christopher has brown eyes. Darren has blue eyes. I have brown eyes. And Christopher had these like really cool, like Michelle Pfeiffer looking eyes. And I was like, man, is that kid lucky? He got these like really cool eyes. And at the ophthalmologist, it was like, she had said something like, have his eyes always been that color? And I remember being like, yeah, aren't they so cool? And she was like, yeah. And then it started to kind of hit like this, there's a lot of other stuff that we don't get that's going on here. And so she labeled it as cloudy corneas. And so I was Googling cloudy cornea, lump on your back, and sinus infections. And everything that popped up was Hurlers. I was like, okay.
And then the photos came.
Well, and it's funny because there's like 100 symptoms for Hurlers, and he had like 3 of them. So I think he had 3 of them that I was in a place where I could accept. And so I was like, well, this isn't true. He's not really developmentally delayed, though he wasn't walking or really talking. So I don't know why I was telling myself he wasn't. But it all seemed kind of like normal, and he was a really happy kid. How could he be in that much pain and be so happy? That didn't make sense to me. And I did an image search, and then I just like lost it on the couch, like just crying, sobbing. And I remember Darren walking through that doorway and he was like, what's the matter? And I was like, just showed him a picture. I mean, they were identical images, even the faces. Is just someone thinking we're crazy and doctors just saying like, no. And, that was when Christopher was 7 months old. He could have been diagnosed with Hurlers at 7 months. He could have been in transplant at 8 months. But at a year, he was incredible during transplant. So, like I said, I was so angry that moment, and I go back to maybe he wouldn't have needed hip surgery if he had gotten diagnosed earlier, but also maybe he wouldn't have survived transplant if he had gotten diagnosed earlier. And so I think those are, like, when I try to, reframe my thinking, I just kind of always try to stay on that side of it. Like, you don't have the luxury of being angry when you're dealing with all this other stuff. And I feel like that's really unhealthy for everyone if that's the kind of stuff you hang on to. But you know, it's part of the journey for sure, but it's, those are the parts you just kind of have to let go sometimes. Though I bring it up every time I talk to someone, so I haven't really let go of it, but it's tough to think about that. I think taking any opportunity that we can to talk to other doctors who maybe haven't even had an opportunity to misdiagnose or not diagnose, but going to BU, when we went to BU with Dr. Hoffman, going to Genzyme and speaking there, and just anything that we can do to encourage doctors to not just look at MPS, but when you've got parents coming in with multiple problems, to look at all of the problems. And I think that's what was missing for Christopher. They were looking at his hands. The hand doctor was looking at his hands. The hip doctor was looking at his hips. When he got his adenoids out finally at 9 months old, they were just looking at his adenoids. And so that kind of stuff, if trying to help everyone see the importance. And as a teacher, right, we're always told you got to look at the whole child. And I think doctors have to be reminded of that too.